Hello everybody, Andy here from Glass Half Dead, the #1 kill team channel on the internet, unless you are aware of literally any other channel. Okay, today we're doing another gotcha guide, and I'm going to tell you what a gotcha guide is and what a gotcha guide isn't going to give you. Let's get straight into it. We don't want to dilly-dally. I'm doing 36 of these potentially, so let's not dwell. So, what is a gotcha? Gotchas are things that mess with you, not with them. If they buff themselves, that is not a gotcha. In learning a team's gotchas, you are also learning how to play the team. So yes, the title of this video is how to play, because that's what people are going to search when they search for these sorts of things. However, the thumbnail is gotcha guide. In this video, okay, you are going to learn the gotchas of the team, and in learning what a team can do against you and the things you need to look out for if you're actually looking to play that team, you're going to learn the things that you should be trying to do to other people. Quick note on what a gotcha is, of course, it's not a buff. If they are able to give themselves ceaseless or balanced or rending, that's not a gotcha. That's just a thing they can do. It's something that you will have to learn to be aware of, but it doesn't stop you from doing anything you need to do to enact your devious schemes. This is not a basics guide. You should understand the basics of playing kill team. I have of course done a how to play video. I've also done various other like line of sight videos, etc. If you're looking for the basics, this isn't going to be it. And not just the basics in the mechanics, but also kind of the basics in how to play kill team in general, right? You should also know your team. I can't refer to always a horde team, a normal team, an elite team into every team. I'm talking about the team and their gotchas. For you, if you're playing, for example, Deathcore, you need to know what your profile does to a Space Marine, if I'm talking about a Space Marine, or if you're playing an elite team, an Eldar, what does your team and how do they in general deal with a horde team or an elite, a Marine team? Equally, so that's your profiles. You also need to know like the basics of the enemies and how much you care about those. If you're playing Deathcore of Krieg, you need to be very aware of blast. But if you're playing Marines, you don't care about blast at all. You don't even have to ask the opponent, hey, do you have any blast? You don't care. There you go. They can hit multiples of you. That's fine. And how that affects your team. What I'm saying in this guide is we're going to be looking at 5 different things. First, we're going to go over pre-game. This is going to affect your operative and your TAC-op selection. So as you rock up to the table with your opponent, you shake hands, you look them in the eye, you give them a dirty glare. And before you pick your team, here are the things you need to know to pick the operatives and the TAC-ops. Deployment. This is after you've picked. This is going to be things that define where you can move, firstly in deployment, but also going into your plan of turn 1. These will be things like seek light, ignore obscuring, because that will define where you can stand safely. Firefight is everything else. Basically, a gotcha here, we're just looking at things that define your dice maths. There you go. Finally, we have interrupts. Interrupts are things that stop your activation. These are the true things. These are the fight first, the hit twice, all these crazy things stop you from activating, possibly even stop you from tapping a point, etc, etc. If you do like what I'm doing here on this channel in general, in this gotcha guide series, in this particular video, whatever, I do have a Patreon. Firstly, a shout out to all of my patrons. You are genuinely the only reason I am still making videos. If you would like to be somebody that makes me still make videos and, you know, donate to my hydration fund, thank you very much. Check me out on Patreon. I also do things like every week I give a rant on some subject or an update of the channel. And if you don't want to do that, you want to support in another way, I do have affiliate links to Element Games and Whaling Games in the UK. If you're UK based, the way that works, by the way, is you just click on the links below. It costs you nothing extra, and I get like a 2% kickback or something tiny in that, but it all adds up. Okay, with that said, let's get straight into it's the Void-Scarred Corsairs, the Eldar. If you know anything about the Eldar, it's that they are all about the shenanigans. So this could be a long one. Firstly, it's what I would consider a standard Eldar profile. It's 8 wounds, 4 up save, 7 move, APL 2. However, no Eldar team is just APL 2. But before we get on to that, just have a look at their weapons. because they do matter. The shuriken pistol and the shuriken rifle there, notice they have rending. And the standard warrior melee weapon, lethal 5. Keep those in mind. Okay. The thing with Eldar is their glass cannons. That's their purpose. They are very killy. Even just the regular warrior, not that their take one, is very killy. Okay. We then get to the pre-game. What do you need to know about them when you're picking your operatives and your tac ops and how you want to play the game? This is one of the very few teams that has lots of piercing. They can take 2 piercing 2 weapons. Be aware of that. If you have a way to ignore piercing, you're playing that all the time. Although nothing ignores piercing 2, but you can lower it with some teams. Yeah. And then everything else has rending and power weapons. Rending, really, really good. If we've learned anything from Blades of Cain, it's that an enemy that can shoot rend you is very, very good at killing stuff. And power weapons are just great. There you go. However, I would say, because of rending and power weapons, if you have an ability that can turn off alternative crits, like rending and lethal 5, you definitely want to bring that. They can also, because why wouldn't they be able to, they can lower piercing by 1 once per turn as a piece of equipment. So if you have the option of piercing weapons versus blast weapons, maybe you want to consider blast. Although, in fairness, if you just have all piercing, that's better still. But there we go. Which takes us to the deployment. Actually, not terrible, to be honest with you. So basically, they can remove Seek Light with the Kernite Hunter. That's the bird dude. There you go. They could just do that. It is what it is. It's Vulcus. Stay behind heavy. You're fine. Going into the firefight phase, they've got quite a bit going on. So this is where we're talking about Aeldari Raiders. This is not an APL2 team. That is just such a... It just isn't. We would call them an APL 2.5 team or a pseudo APL 3 team. Every model gets a free dash every time they activate. So this does mean that when it comes to controlling points, they are APL 2, but a free dash is really good. Now they can't, you know, like a Marine, shoot twice, fight twice, but that free dash means they're incredibly fast. So really, it's an APL 2.5 team. Then we have the leader called the Felarch, who has something called Veteran Raider. This is related to the Aeldari Raiders. So instead of a free dash, they get a free 1 AP action instead of dash. And we will talk about this a little bit later on with the Felarch, but they have an interrupt ability. Keep in mind this. We then have the Starstorm Duelist. This is the guy with 2 pistols, looks awesome. They can shoot in melee and they can shoot twice. There you go, for 1 AP. Cool. We then get the Shade Runner. The Shade Runner is an interesting model. In fact, the Shade Runner is what we're actually going to talk about in the Diabolical play. Not because it's super, super gotcha, but just understanding how it works is probably quite good for everybody, because it can be harder to use for those that are trying to just dart in and dart out. You kind of have to go through a model to be effective. Anyway, they have a Blink Pack, which is a 7-inch teleport. You just always use this when they're moving. It means they're obviously only measuring horizontal distance. They can get up and down terrain very easily because it's just a teleport. But then the Shade Runner also has something called a Slicing Attack. It's the Slicing Attack that we're going to be looking at in the Diabolical play. And whenever you make a reposition, you have to move into and out of the enemy base, not control range, the enemy base. And when you do, you deal 1d3 plus 2 damage. So, statistically 4 damage. There you go. Continuing with the firefight step, we have the Seeker. Now the Seeker is kind of their generic Psyker. But it has something called Warp Fold. You can take 2 friendly operatives within 5 inches of the Seeker and swap where they are. If one of them moved, they can only dash from there on, but keeping in mind that that dash will still be free. So the free dash and then 2 APL. And the Seeker also has something called Warding Shield, which is really good. So once per turn, you select one of your friendlies within a certain distance. I can't recall what, I didn't put it here, great. And then once per turn, they get just a scratch. Now, a Just a Scratch, as I'm sure we all know, is that you can ignore 1 damage dice. Normally, Just a Scratch is 1 normal damage dice. But note here that this ability that can be played every turn is able to ignore crits as well. So that is a big gotcha, actually. Then we get Plunderers. This is deployed. D3 operatives dash immediately, not in their activation. So in the strategic step, you just have D3 operatives that can dash immediately. But then if they do, they cannot use their free dash in their activation. And they also cannot dash. And then we get Light Fingers, another ploy. They can do a mission action whilst in control range. This is pretty good. Light Fingers is always pretty solid, but do keep in mind that the enemy, that you are 2 APL. So you need to have 2 of your operatives on that point to contest it and then control it before you'll be able to Light Fingers one of them. There you go. Which brings us over to interrupts. So the Felarch, the leader, as discussed, has something called 1 step ahead. After an enemy action, not activation, action, you can roll 1d6. And if that d6 is above the enemy's APL, you can shoot or fight against them. The Felarch then takes -1 APL because they've done a shoot or a fight, right? It's oddly, yeah, it's an interesting way of making it work. But again, the Felarch still gets the free dash. And there are no action restrictions because this happened outside of your activation. So instead of being 3 APL, you become 2 APL, which is what you are on your data sheet anyway, because you're -1 APL. Cool. Yeah, just keep in mind that as soon as you've moved within 8 inches of the Felarch, they can just shoot you because they have an 8-inch pistol. There you go. And if you charge them, they will obviously fight first. We then have the Hunter, who has something called Falchu's Bond. This is the model that can seek light against you. They also have 2 types of shoot they can do against you. One of them is using its bird. If they have not shot you with that bird ability, then they get to fight first if you charge them. Cool. They also have something called Erudite Hunter. In the strategic gambit step, you can select an operative within 9 inches. Then when that operative moves, you, as the Erudite Hunter, can reposition or charge, but you must end closer to that operative that you picked. So, if you charge them, you have obviously interrupted them pretty heavily, and then that is in tandem with the even no bird shot, you get to fight first. That's really what this is about. Quite why they allow you to just reposition, I don't really know. It should be you must charge the enemy. But yeah, the Hunter's a little bit of a beast, I'm not going to lie. He will charge you if you end within 9 and then gets fight first, which will leave almost everyone in the game really not wanting to deal with it. Because again, power weapon on normal dudes. We then have the Kanathi, who has something called Bladed Stance. This allows the Kanathi to fight first, but that first hit must be a block. That first resolved success must be a block. Finally, we have Opportunistic Fighters. They are able to fall back. Sorry, I've said that the wrong way around. Opportunistic Fighters is a ploy. And if you declare your fallback, they will play Opportunistic Fighters, and you get to fallback, but you first take 2d3 damage. In general, what this means is you don't want to fall back, but keep in mind, this Kanathi, this Hunter, they're able to fight first. So do you take 2d3, or do you let them hit you before you get to hit them? Or even just with everybody else, they all have power weapons. Dealing with power weapons is really quite challenging for some teams. Even Marines don't really want to take a 6 damage lethal 5 weapon, right? Cool. So with that said, all of these, although they have a lot of stuff here, it's not anything that really needs to be seen to be believed. You get it. But I am going to go to the table, go to the Diabolical play, and really let you really go into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of moving the Shade Runner so that it gets its slicing attack off. So I just want to quickly show how the Shade Runner slicing attack actually works. There are similar abilities with other teams, but with this one, very specifically, you draw a 1mm line basically at any point of your base as you move along it. It doesn't have to be in a straight line. It's just basically your base can create that 7-inch line. The only thing to note here specifically is that your base has to move over the enemy base and then back off of it. And you obviously cannot finish within control range. When you keep in mind that it's a 28mm base, this means that to actually do this and then end up over 1 inch away again, you're really looking at it taking a minimum of 3 inches off of your move when you do this. Because of course how movement works in Kill Team is we're always using full inches and your base is over 1 inch. So if you start your move out of control range, you then move into it. But if you only move 1 inch, but if you only move 1 inch, you aren't actually having your base go over the enemy base. So you have to move 2 inches, even if from that other inch you only actually use a millimeter, right? Then you can continue through, but if you don't want to, because you don't want to end up in that area, you would then stop after using 1 millimeter and have to move back. So this move of going in for 2 and then out for 2 is actually a very large move. So being able to use the slicing attack isn't as easy as it sounds like it should be because of the way that we have to use full inches anytime we move. But of course, if you're going through the enemy like this, then it's actually very easy. You stay on conceal and then you use your silent attack to finish a model off or damage another model. It's a very sneaky little play from a sneaky, maneuverable little model, and if that isn't the Corsair's Diabolical move, I don't know what is.